Hello, this is Archie Dunlop with Talking Astrology with Archie. And right now I'm going to tell you about May 2023. Now, I do this with a certain amount of trepidation. As you have perhaps realized by now, I'm not the most optimistic person in the world. In fact, as an astrologer, I do get some criticism. I have a dear friend, and she tells me that yes, I might be a good astrologer, but my presentation has something to be desired. By presentation, I think she's really talking about my ability to give clients what they want. Now, when a client comes to see an astrologer, they want to be told that everything is fine. And the trouble is, I don't like to lie to people. I'm very down to earth in that sense. Although being an astrologer is hardly down to earth. That's sort of pie in the sky nonsense that I waste my time on it. So I'm not completely down to earth. May, it's my birthday. End of the month, it's going to be my birthday. And I'm going to be 61 on May the 30th, which is that's a disaster. But I do have quite a lot of Taurus in my chart. I have Taurus rising and I have Mars in Taurus. And I think this does make me a little too down to earth when I'm talking about things. I like to be honest as far as I see. So if I think that someone has no chance of finding love in the next year, I'll tell them. If I think they're not going to get rich in their current modus operandi, I will tell them. I just tell them as it is, and very often they just don't come back. So bear that in mind when I talk about the astrology for May 2023. I'm going to be very down to earth about it, and maybe you won't like what I want. You won't like what I have to say. Anyway, so I'm now going to look at May 2023. My approach, I believe, is down to earth. Is going to be analytical, I suppose. And that's Zelensky's chart. I was just looking at it. He has problems later on in May, but I'll come back to that. This is the chart for May the 1st, 2023. This is the chart set for London when April becomes May. Now, the chart in itself doesn't tell us a great deal, although there is a view that by taking that exact moment when April becomes May, you can tell something about what's going to be happening. So that happening in that month. So at the beginning of May, we can see that Pluto's in Aquarius, and Sun's in Taurus, and Jupiter is in late Aries. Now that's important, late Aries. Jupiter is about to change sign, and so it's going to move into Taurus later on in the month. Now what we can't see in this chart is that Pluto is on the absolute verge of going retrograde. Now normally that wouldn't be such a big deal, but there's something very special about Pluto's position. Pluto is pretty much conjunct the degree, indeed the degree and minute, of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in December 2020. Jupiter and Saturn had a conjunction December 2020, and it was in the first degree of Aquarius. Now Pluto is rolling over that point, and it is going retrograde. This is a point it's going direct. Now, that point where a planet goes direct, if it's hitting something else, it can be really intense. I think it was the astrologer Stephen Arroyo. I read some of his books in the 1980s, and he referred to it a planet going stationary direct or stationary retrograde as being like like when your finger goes through a candle flame. If you move your finger through a candle flame, it doesn't really hurt because your finger is moving. But station direct is what happens if you stop your finger right in the middle of a candle flame. Yeah, it hurts. It burns. And so we have to be careful of that, because Pluto is stationing on the degree of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. And so I think over the course of May, we're going to really feel what this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is all about. This Jupiter-Saturn conjunction was in Aquarius, and so I think as May progresses, we'll start to see how governments are trying to take over our lives. Remember, Aquarius is about the government in many ways. It's about the government trying to control us through technology. And Aquarius, I must emphasize, is not a nice sign. All that age of Aquarius, that stuff is complete nonsense. It's optimistic garbage. Aquarius is the sign of fascism. Aquarius is a sign of governments trying to control our lives. Aquarius is a sign of state overreach. Aquarius is a sign of Terminator. So we have to bear that in mind. It's also, of course, the sign of revolution. So there are two sides to the coin. Governments trying to control our lives, people trying to resist. And so with Pluto stationing on that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, I think that's what we're going to see. Now, another thing about the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius that perhaps more controversial is that I wrote an article on my blog at the time about Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in 2020, and my view was that the following 20 years is going to be a time. It's going to be Russia's time. Russia is going to have more and more power, control. It's almost perhaps the Russian decade or Russian 2 decades. And I know a lot of you don't want to hear that, but that's the way I see it. And it may actually be much longer than that. Aquarius is a sign that is that is strongly connected with Russia. And the East in general, maybe China as well. So maybe with the Pluto going stationary direct on that conjunction, people will start to realize for the first time that they've misunderstood Russia and they've underestimated Russia, and that might be a theme going through May. But that's a very short-term thing. I'm talking about 20 years. Indeed, that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius, the previous time you had a conjunction in Aquarius was, I think, during the Mongol invasion, the threat from the East. And that's perhaps another part of what's starting to happen in May. Now, I'm not making a moral judgment here, either way. It is what it is. If that's what fate wants, if fate wants to overthrow Western hegemony, who are we to argue? That's what fate wants. That's what the universe wants. So that's Pluto going stationary direct at the beginning of the month. That, I think, sets an overall theme for the month. And then almost straight away after that, on May the 2nd, look at Jupiter and Neptune. Now, Jupiter and Neptune, you see, Jupiter's at 2619 Aries, Neptune is at 2644 Pisces. On May the 2nd, there's an exact 30-degree aspect between Jupiter and Neptune. And that aspect is idealistic, but I don't think idealistic in a happy way. I think it's about people having false fantasies, believing that things are possible, but actually they're not possible at all. So if at the beginning of May you start being optimistic and overly, overly, overly in an overly spiritual kind of way, and it's all wonderful. Don't fall for it. It's a con, and so, but beware of con artists at the beginning of May. Beware of people peddling false dreams. So yeah, that's something we do have to be careful about. The beginning, and then a few days later, on the fifth of May, we have you can see the moon is here, the sun is there, so we're moving towards a full moon, and we have a full moon on May the 5th. So that's a time, perhaps, when many of us will come down to earth. It's not a very nice full moon on May the 5th. Those May full moons often aren't nice because the moon is in Scorpio, sun is in Taurus. In fact, the moon is in the Via Combusta. When you've got the moon in the Via Combusta, anything can happen. You have plans and they're torn apart. You have high hopes and they're torn apart, particularly when just after Jupiter and Neptune are in a semi-sextile aspect. So, I don't regard that full moon as being particularly fortunate, especially, if you look, Uranus is there as well. So there's a Sun-Uranus conjunction, opposition the moon. So as you move into May, the full moon starts to have its influence. And I don't think that full moon is necessarily just going to be a one-day wonder, just on May the 5th. I think there's going to be a lot of tension, there's going to be arguments, and many of us may find that our careful plans are really torn apart. Now, this full moon is set for Westminster. I mean, I'm not going to make any real comment about that regarding how it affects the UK. Of course, you've got a full moon just before the coronation on May the 6th. I've already looked at that coronation chart. It's a bit of a damp squib. Moon is in Scorpio. I think it's not going anywhere. I don't think the coronation in England, if you are in England, if you're watching it, it's not going to be a wonderful, exciting event. I don't think it's going to be a disaster, but having a coronation just after a rather unfortunate full moon kind of doesn't really bode well for the future of the monarchy. But I'm not saying I'm a Republican, but I mean I do think there are going to be issues with the monarchy, or at least not necessarily with monarchy, but with Charles III. He's not going to really take the monarchy in wonderful new directions. That will perhaps be up to his son, and we'll see how the monarchy develops. But I wouldn't see this as a great day for Britain. Although people might have fun. It's a holiday. Is it a holiday? Well, it's a Saturday, isn't it? Is it a Saturday? I think so. So that's the full moon, and as I said, I don't think that it's I don't think that it's particularly great. Then, as you move into May the 6th, we find that Venus moves. Venus will of course be. Venus is at 27 Gemini. Venus moves into Cancer. I think that's quite good. Venus moving into Cancer, because Venus in Gemini it's a bit too cognitive. It's a bit too analytical. It just wants to have fun. It finds it difficult to embark on deep relationships. Venus in Cancer, on the other hand, is going to be more homely, more sensitive. So in terms of relationships, if you want a caring, sharing relationship with your partner, when Venus goes into Cancer, that may help to might help to bring it out. So what else? I suppose one of the big things about the big events in May is going to be Jupiter changing sign. You can see Jupiter is on May the 5th, is it 27? Let's go back to May the 1st. Jupiter moving from Aries to Taurus. So what does that actually mean? Well, this happens on the 16th of May. 16th of May, Jupiter goes into Taurus. In general, people are going to be less impulsive. I think with Jupiter in Aries, people have been impulsive. They've wanted to take action immediately. I mean, look at the year so far with Jupiter in Aries. Look at how politicians have been rushing around trying to respond to this, trying to respond to that, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Silicon Valley Bank crisis, you've got to do something. But with Jupiter in Taurus, it may slow things down a bit. But it doesn't mean to say that we're in any way out of the woods. Jupiter went into Taurus in 2000, in February. I think it was February 2000, 2 months before the .com crash. So just because Jupiter's in Taurus doesn't mean we're insulated from financial disaster. Jupiter in Taurus, we have to think about countries that are ruled by Taurus. They may be influenced by Jupiter going into Taurus, possibly in a fortunate way. I mean, the two countries that come to mind that have a connection with Taurus are Ireland and Israel. Ireland is the Emerald Isle, Taurian country traditionally. So Jupiter in Taurus may represent changes in Ireland, for better or for worse. Israel is really complicated. I mean, Israel is a Taurus. It's the earth, haaretz, I think means the earth in Hebrew. So Jupiter going into Taurus, and of course, Israel became a country when the sun was in Taurus. So I think we're going to see a lot of changes in Israel. And I know we've already got a lot of chaos there with Netanyahu trying to do this and that and so forth. But I'm guessing that Jupiter in Taurus, in terms of Israel, is going to perhaps stabilize the situation. I think that this overreach by Netanyahu, he'll perhaps realize that there are limits to what he can do, and I think it could be a good time for Israel, provided the government doesn't, the government understands its limitations. Of course, I haven't looked at Israel's chart. I haven't looked at a lot of other stuff, but that's what I'm saying is purely on the basis of Jupiter going into Taurus, and you can't do astrology like that. Just looking at one factor. Then then we've got 19th of May, just after Jupiter goes into Taurus, we have got a new moon. So this represents a new cycle, a new stage of affairs happening. There's our new moon at 28 Taurus. What kind of a new moon is it? I think it's a new moon that is perhaps somewhat dramatic, because if you look at Mars, it's at 29-26 Cancer. It's on the verge of entering Leo, and it's opposition Pluto. And look, you've got Jupiter. Jupiter is square Pluto, and on the 20th you're going to have Mars square Pluto, Mars opposition Pluto. In the jargon, that is a T-square. So around May the 19th, there's going to start to be major tension in the air. And if you look at May, and you look at May in a graphic sense, I'm sorry, I can't show you the graphs, but you will see around May the 20th, 21st, 22nd, there's a huge amount of energy involving, all that Mars, Pluto, Jupiter. That's when the month really starts to blow up. And I think particularly when Pluto goes into Taurus. When Mars goes into Leo, and as I've said in an earlier video, Mars going into Leo is important not least because it affects Zelensky. Now there is Zelensky's chart. He has got Mars. If you look at Zelensky's chart, he has got Mars in Leo. He's got Mars in Leo, and so already Zelensky has Pluto opposition his Mars. As I said, Pluto transiting Pluto is on his Mars. So if we go back to there's Pluto opposition his Mars, and then at the full moon. New moon. Around the 19th, Mars makes the conjunction with his own Mars. So Zelensky has a Mars return, and that is opposition Pluto. So I think with all this stuff going on around the 20th, I think we can expect something quite major to be going on in Ukraine. So that's somewhere to really look at. Now, again, I know that major stuff is always going on in the Ukraine, but Zelensky is the president of Ukraine. He, in a way, is the human embodiment of what Ukraine is because they've chosen him as his president. In a way, by looking at Zelensky's horoscope, you're looking at the horoscope of Ukraine. Zelensky is a very fixed person. You can see that in his chart. And Ukraine is incredibly stubborn. And with Pluto hitting Zelensky's Mars, it's like Pluto hitting Ukraine's Mars. And I do think around the 20th, after that full moon on the 19th, we could see some really serious stuff going on, which so far hasn't happened. At the same time, I've said Jupiter is square Pluto. Jupiter square Pluto, which is exact on the 18th. The general view when you've got Jupiter square Pluto on the 18th, it's the desire for self-improvement. Now, on a personal level, that's great. We're going to around the 18th, towards the end of May, we're going to start thinking that our lives aren't good enough, that we need to do something about it. So while it might not sound like a good thing to believe one's life isn't good enough, it's great if that motivates us to do something about it. So if we want to change our lives for the better and really make strides to improve our lives in a dramatic transformational way, now might be the chance to do it. And then on the 21st of May, things start to change because the Sun goes into Gemini. You see, there's on the 19th. Sun is at 28 Taurus. So on the 21st, the Sun goes into Gemini, and I think we're going to find, on a personal level, that perhaps things are a bit lighter. There's more flexibility, because there's a real build-up of tension coming up, with all that stuff in, Taurus, Leo, Pluto in Aquarius. And the Sun going into Gemini on a personal level might give us a break. We can make some changes which might not have been possible to do before. However, if you're a nation or a politician, I'm not convinced you're going to have that option. You're just you're involved in these larger cycles, and as I said on several occasions, if you are a politician, you have less free will than if you are an ordinary non-entity like me, for example. What I do, fate couldn't care less. But if you're a politician, you're someone like Zelensky or Rishi Sunak or Joe Biden, what happens to you is completely fated. So those are the main themes for May 2023. I hope you found that useful and that you didn't find it too depressing. But that's all I've got to say, and thank you for listening.